Thanks for joining us at Zero Basis Points. This is our first episode. You're here with Haik, Sahakyan and George Guidotti. And George, there's a lot of podcasts out there already in this space. We talk a lot about them in our free time. But why should listeners watch this one? What do you think? I mean, you've been in this industry for a while, so tell us a little bit about yourself and what you think we're doing here and how we can add value.
Loaded question. But anybody who knows me knows I've got a lot to say. I've been observing this industry my entire life. I'm the son of an advisor, brother to advisors, and I built a CRM solution for advisors where I really had to learn not only about how advisors use CRM, but everything in that orbit. So since 2008, I've developed a really strong opinion for how our space values, implements, and uses technology. And, I share my opinion, on LinkedIn and in comments of posts. I share my opinion in X. And I think that I have such a strong opinion that I get worked up that, because I want to tell so much more than a comment on about an article, that really the only thing that made sense to me was to start a podcast. And you and I love talking about like what we see out there at RIA Biz or on LinkedIn or what's happening in crypto land or the opportunities that wealth management could do to expand its reach way beyond where it is today. So just been in it a long time. I'm a super talkative, super optimistic, some might say hyper, but very fanatical about implementing technology stacks better than most people I know. And I think that that's because I've done it for so many years, but also in all those years worked closely with advisors, just kind of fine tuning like what stinks about being an advisor.
I mean, you're definitely a wealth of knowledge. And for the listeners, we got introduced at T3 2024. You were our kiosk buddy at that time, and you probably heard our pitch so much that you could already sell ARQA to anyone who walked by. And we learned a little bit about you guys at that point. But, I think where we came into connection and collaboration was primarily around the same ideas where, this industry is pretty packed with a lot of information. Like you said, there's a lot you've seen during your time prior to iPipeline and currently at your role as well. We're exposed to so much technology and it's changing so much where, in my opinion, I think institutional tech was such a laggard in this space for a while. Now with AI and everything else coming to fruition, it's giving it that ability to catapult and go ahead of what or catch up to retail, which I think is very interesting and kind of what we've been doing over the last couple of months to years. So I think we have a lot of interesting stuff to say. I can't wait to hear more about what you have to say. But before we get into that, kind of give me, tell me a little bit about yourself career-wise, anything that, kind of brought you to this point, because I think you have a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, I'm thinking of more when you were asking that, and I'm going to get a little bit personal here for a second, but I'll make this story a little bit shorter. But me and my sweetheart, who I met in Philadelphia, decided, at one point in our lives that we were going to sell everything we owned and move to California. After talking about it, for 2 years, living in Rittenhouse in Center City, Philadelphia, literally just daydreaming and looking west and talking about what it would be like to live in California. And so we did it. She worked in fashion. I worked, in operations management. So when we got out to LA, I was working for, ironically, an Armenian from Glendale, so ironically, but it was a furniture rental startup that he was, if you're doing a big party or big production in LA, you're pulling together audiovisual people, you're pulling together people who are going to furnish the event. So he was furnishing the event, making it look cool. So Armin Garbesian was my boss in LA, but he wanted to do a better job of how he was marketing to event planners about the designs he was coming up with. And we were like, well, how can we target these people? And, my brother and my family were also in the advisory space building and talking about a CRM solution. And I was telling Armin, I'm like, maybe we could fine tune the recipients of like the catalogs and target people better if we got them into a CRM. And so we started deploying Salesforce. This is like 2008, real early days. And I'm talking to my brother about it. And he's saying, giving me details about the CRM, but I'm saying, well, look, man, I could just start selling this for you. Like I could sell this all day long. And so in 2008, I started doing that. I quit that job working for Lounge 22. We sold the company to Court. He sold the company to Court shortly after that. We worked a while trying to get it acquired. But it was also like event planning was dying at that point. People were spending less money on some parties. 2008, Great Recession. And so I decided I would start selling CRM to financial advisors. An even worse time and worse decision to start a startup. But we were a bootstrap startup, and I started selling Grendel, a web-based CRM solution to advisors. So I'm just cold calling advisors. Mind you, I've also just had a baby at the time. I'm in a one-bedroom apartment in LA holding a baby and a pacifier, a binky in his mouth while I'm cold calling advisors giving demos. So really the urgency to sell and to get out of a one-bedroom into a more spacious place, it was like, there was only one way out of that apartment. So I had to really understand advisors so well. Not only it's like, okay, hey, we want an easier way to create a client. We want an easier way to write a note. It would be cool if we could see the accounts. Let's aggregate accounts. If you have all the accounts, can we see the current state of the accounts? Is a model, and can we compare that to another model and rebalance? And since you have all the accounts, can you calculate performance on that account? So can we expose all this to a client in a portal? Can they aggregate accounts themselves there? So I had to go down every avenue deploying Grendel to all these different firms. And in the end, we had about 5,000 firms that we deployed to. And then we were sold. We sold to a company called Equisoft. And this is a small team of like 36 people, but we sold to Equisoft in 2019 and worked for them for like a year and a half, 2 years. And then pandemic came along and I switched over to working for Invent. I'm going on a long story here, but I'll wrap it up. But Invent is Oleg Tishkevich's firm. And what they're doing is they're consuming data into a data lake for large clients and then resurfacing that data on top of the data lake in a unified visual layer that also consumes data from different partners like ARQA. And that brings us to kind of T3, which is where I met you. So I spent so much time working on the day in the life of an advisor of I need to log into CRM and write a note and create an account and rebalance it or open up a new account. I like client portals to larger RIAs, 4 billion, 30 billion plus, and larger institutions and custodians and carriers that needed larger solutions that use visual layers on top of data lakes and solutions like Invent. And then eventually I left Invent just to take a job with a local company, which is iPipeline, who I've known forever. Local company here, they acquired Laser App, which was one of my first integration partners at Grendel. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I've just, and this whole concept of workflows that you and I get into a lot is when we first started building Grendel, it was like, every time I need to respond to something that happens, a client is coming in tomorrow for a meeting. Do I have a checklist of things that I do to prepare for that call? And that's what we might call workflow. Or I'm audited and that triggers, 15 things that I say I need to do. That's workflow. But the idea of workflow, I think, has gotten like so out of hand and bloated. And, we have so many tasks that we're like managing tasks instead of executing tasks. So, when I met you and everything that ARQA was doing, and I see like all these different AI solutions, I heard you over my shoulder, like in the distance.
Yeah,
and I'm
I
like,
remember.
That's my AI solution that I'm going to like, when people ask me about AI, I'm like, you need to talk to ARQA, because it was really like, you were just kind of using, it wasn't like, oh, we can scan your notes and, give you, recommended next steps, which is definitely cool. And if you're not doing that at a minimum, you should be doing that. But I think that, I know that what I heard coming over my shoulder was just like examples of like questions that advisors it's painful for them to get everything they want from performance systems. It's painful when they know that they have all of the data with one particular provider and they just have a couple questions within that pool of data. And ARQA, I was like, man, they're doing it exactly the way that advisors want it to be done. And so many people, I hear all these solutions that I'm like, that's cool. Haven't heard an advisor complain about that problem yet, but yeah, that's cool. So anyway, I rambled there, and I don't even know if I answered your question, but that's a little bit about kind of how I got where I am today and why I have such a strong opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that was perfect. I know I knew your story kind of high level from all the conversations we had and when we met at T3. So I think it was good to kind of get the rundown of the whole shebang up to your point that we met. But yeah, I think a lot of the career and everything we do in our personal life shapes a lot of where we've been and our opinions. And for me, it was very interesting because I started at a private wealth management firm. And I was a user of software like the ones that are out there with S&C. I think it was called Gym 2 at the time. And most of it was just me running performance reports, plugging in the numbers into like PowerPoint, and then having to generate those as reports themselves. So it was super old software. Something was wrong. You had to go wait a whole day for it to recalculate and whatnot. And I made my way over, and that time I was in San Francisco. I was early on. That was one of my first jobs. But I made my way over to Boston for the investment team for that same firm. And then, too slow from a career trajectory standpoint. So I leaped over to a startup, Adapar, in New York and worked out of their team for the client solution side. And a lot of it was implementing family offices, RIAs on the software, working on my way up to institutions. But something that was just glaring in that market was that we didn't have any good consultants who were helping these clients because it was a super flexible solution. They had to come on board, kind of manage themselves. So I ended up leaving in 2017 and started a consulting firm called Blackmar, working with those same clients. And then I started getting into the tech space because a lot of the solutions that I was solving for weren't just manual workflows and things like that. There was technology that I could introduce to solve for it. And I think that's where, interestingly enough, the trajectory led me to ARQA because I had a vision of where I wanted my clients to be the most efficient and operationally successful. And it didn't need to be with me holding their hands every step of the way, really. It could be augmenting that workflow with some form of AI. And so that's where the foundation for ARQA came about. And, it's been a while since we've started the company because we had to build so much of the tooling in the back end. But once we were ready to go out to the market and kind of get out of stealth, which was 2024, T3 was our first conference. We decided to go out and kind of make a name for ourselves. Surprisingly enough, and I've had to tell this story a couple of times to some folks who I'm circling back around who I met at T3, was when we were there, we would tell them about AI and they were barely, I think ChatGPT came out 2023, like November, September was when it hit kind of mainstream. Folks hadn't even logged into ChatGPT at that point. So when we were telling them like you can ask questions, get something about your portfolio back, they were just dumbfounded, and it was like I don't even know what to do with this thing. So obviously there's some time that's passed since then, and people have come around. I think the expectations around AI have changed. So there's a lot of things that we can do, I think, in that space that starts augmenting that workflow. And I think what's interesting is you've seen and you've been in the wild, wild west of some of these wealth tech solutions. I have a lot of respect for everyone who's been in Advent, everyone who's kind of like had to sell and sling software in the space for a while. But now it's coming to a point where, so many tools are getting added on with a lot of people paying attention to this space. So I think there's a need for something like this, like 0 basis points, because this market, I would say, for lack of a better term, is a little frothy with a lot of startups coming into the space. Some of it real, some of it not so much. But realistically, I think you can rely on the experience to kind of say, put a finger out into the wind and say, yeah, I think there's some traction here or not. So I think it'll be very interesting to kind of hear from your take. What's nice out there, what's working well, what you're seeing as the potential future for wealth tech as well, and kind of lean on that advice.
So when we get into like the value of the things that we can provide for 0 basis points, so often we're engaging in conversations on LinkedIn, and I feel like I'm getting into arguments because I'm so defensive and passionate about my ideas. But and I'm trying to condense that passion and idea and comment down to like 2 sentences. And if I can say, because you and I both were saying on LinkedIn recently and X that the top 5 problems in wealth management. Let's just talk about the biggest problem in wealth management as an example. What this platform will allow us to do at 0 basis points is argue this point. Tell me that I'm wrong. The biggest problem in wealth management is data collection. Okay. And so many people, oh, that's not, growth is the biggest problem, all these different things. And I'll say, having spent 20 years working on as a SaaS provider, I will tell you that at least in my perception, 85 to 90% of the industry wakes up depending on API and ETL to STP calls to update the data in the performance system, financial planning system, CRMs. And maybe that doesn't seem like a problem, but if the updates don't occur correctly and cost basis or something doesn't come across right, it's a big problem. So we're relying on the solution to the problem to work while we're sleeping. So that's been a big problem that engineers like have stabilized. And when something goes wrong, every engineer is like, I didn't change anything. So you got a big problem. But not only that is any firm that's growing. Let's just focus on Barron's top 100 firms. But any firm that's growing is acquiring other advisors. They're recruiting other advisors and their data. So they need to consume that data. You can play it cool, use your own data, use your own tech stack, but you can use Redtail and Black Diamond for now, but eventually you'll be using Orion and Salesforce or whatever. But how they collect that data from their clients, that is part of why I'm at iPipeline. I talked about how I got here. I guess I should talk about, I'm at iPipeline today because they are not only local to me, good people that I know, and I know a lot of the team over the last 20 years, but also they solve for on a massive scale data collection. Problem number 2, data curation. Like, is this data clean and reliable? Like, and can we isolate it and do all these cool things with ARQA and AI? But data curation, so data collection, data curation, data processing, and then the last 2 problems. I guess I am talking about all 5. Is what the UI stinks. Right. And then the last one is performance reporting is too expensive. Like, half the times I want to aggregate all of my clients' accounts just to know how much money they have. I don't necessarily need performance enabled on every single account. So I hear that all the time, and RIAs are blowing their financial stack, spending a lot of extra money aggregating accounts just to get a holistic view, as opposed to, I just need a collection of the performance-enabled accounts bundled with the rest of the accounts. I need it to be easy, so I'm not jumping around different screens. And when I think about like all the things that I learned when I was at Invent, and what Oleg's company and team does so well, and I can't talk too much about Invent without giving all due credit to, like, that is one of the, that's like of like what ARQA is working on and what Invent is working on. That's like SpaceX and Blue Orbit or whatever the other
Blue
ones.
Origin, yeah.
Blue Origin. Like you're working 15-hour, 20-hour days to land on Mars, and they're the most ambitious products. And people like Peter Franco, Craig Uhlenkopf, Mike Perlov, Alex Andreev, like these guys, Oleg, are really pushing some of the most innovative concepts, and they're pulling it off. But they taught me about bringing data into the data lake, getting it clean, what a data lake house is, and how we can surface and visualize that data on top with the participation of other integrated vendors in the space. And that community, that Invent Village, is just really one of the coolest things I'm seeing in the industry. But really, that's what led me to again, ARQA. Again, just advisors saying, I just want to see this a different way. Like, if I want to see or consume performance data in a way that's more valuable to me and my clients, like, just give it to me. Like, can't I just talk, and instead of requesting new report packages? There's just easier ways, I think, of doing things. But back to like the value we can bring in about 0 basis points. I think we can go down any rabbit hole. But that's what we're going to do. So, that's what, and we're going to do it for 0 basis points.
I think you touched up on a bunch of stuff. I think one of them was that I want to comment on is LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn is, we've had our fair share of battles on LinkedIn and X around some of the concepts, and it might be unpopular opinions, but realistically, it's just because context is missing. A lot of folks on there are, we were talking about these 5 issues, but someone was like, yeah, growth, and it's like, sure, within context, growth is a problem, but if you can't solve for these basic necessities for your firm, how are you going to walk into any other firm and say, I'm going to acquire you, whether it's an organic growth or organic growth scaling, if you can't do the basic kind of reports, etc. And one of the nightmare situations is that a lot of people are dependent on those APIs, ETLs, SFTP workflows, but they don't care until shit hits the fan, really, right? And I had, an unnamed platform back in the day that I had built to, where we were pulling a bunch of tax law data every day to send them into this other investor tool called Partner, or Perform actually, for some of their fixed income reporting. And one morning we see assets across the board for all the clients double up. And what ended up happening, it's a great problem to have, but realistically, we knew something was wrong in the data. And you go back and look, and tax lots were sent twice by an institution and were processed. So everything from a position level looked fine, but once you looked at the tax lots, which is the level we were pulling from, everything was doubled up. And, obviously raise the flag, raise your hand, call everyone, hey, people are reporting on these, so figure it out. Luckily, it was early enough in the day to be fixed, but, no one really knows these issues until you're deep in the weeds with it. And anyone on that platform who wasn't there, a customer at that time, probably doesn't even know that exists. But what's the next big mine you kind of step on that happens to you, right? And I think that's why there's a lot of workflows, things like that can be automated over time. And I think it's interesting that you're one of those folks that saw it early on. I think a lot more people are seeing it too. I've had a couple of calls over the last couple of weeks where we've been talking to them about the core script and a couple of our modules which are leveraging AI to do this stuff, and people are like, why wasn't this there before? Obviously technology just wasn't there quite yet for AI to be leveraged in this way. But also, you have to take the precautions of security and privacy, because it is kind of Pandora's box. You don't want to just send everything in and expect to see what you want, because it's kind of a privacy risk. So you got to be very careful, deliberate, but I think there's a responsible way of rolling all this out. So I think those are good points. But one thing I find kind of funny, with so much of the social media and professional kind of social media going around, we talk about this a lot. I feel like LinkedIn's a little limited in the way that, people start kind of not criticizing, but I guess interacting with some of these ideas out there. It's definitely used as a powerhouse for advertising and marketing. We all have to do it because our clients are on there, our prospects are on there as well. I've kind of made my way over to X a little more because it's a little more kind of free of certain
Fun.
pains and
Yeah.
professionalism. But you brought this up to my attention, where the thumbs up essentially has transformed what it really means, because of LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, no, if you've gotten anybody who's in a relationship, and if you text your partner, hey, I'll be home 30 minutes late, and they give you a thumbs up, like that's not a good sign. So anywhere, I think that thumbs up is just it's when the other options are to love it, to let the world know that it was like an innovative, or a cool idea. I forget what LinkedIn calls them, but LinkedIn's become such and people could say this about X, but it's such a polite echo chamber that you can't exchange ideas freely without being concerned that you're going to offend somebody that doesn't have the brass that it takes to hang out on X. And because you've got to be able to, I'm on LinkedIn and I'll say, hey, well, you should look at Reddit about that. And some guy will be like, yeah, well, why don't you enlighten me? This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
something that happened. I was like, well, first of all, I was agreeing with you. And you didn't look at Reddit. And I did say, I was agreeing with you. And if you, my guess is that you didn't look at Reddit. And he said to send the link, and he will. And if you're on X long enough, pretty quickly that you don't ask people for the source. You do your own research if they don't provide the source. So ideally, like, the source is there, but like, don't make me go to Reddit and find like the best thing that's going to support like, I mean, like, so it's just like X is moving a lot faster. The pool is way bigger. It's infinite. Whereas, LinkedIn is like a necessary evil that you've got to put out material to let that world know that you're still alive. Because in our conference universe, like if you're not regularly attending like a certain set of like, wealth management conferences, like I could name the 5 that like that people won't know. But if you pepper LinkedIn well enough, it's like almost as good enough as attending
It's
the
a sign
conference.
of life, basically.
Exactly. Like, are you out there? Right.
Well,
But it's
what's funny though, when you mentioned the resource, kind of finding the link and referencing it, there was this time where I don't know if you remember, let me Google that for you links,
yeah,
where
I've still done that, and I think I did that to my mom, and she asked me how I did that.
and it would just go into the Google search and just do the question that you wanted. So I think it's funny because, and especially now with the way that data has been kind of transformed in the social media arena, where it's like you can find any resource that'll fit kind of your narrative anyway. So someone's so
Right.
easily can go find someone who asked the question on Reddit and then post it up and say like, well, oh no, it's not like that, it's like this. And it's kind of funny how that's been kind of fighting words on LinkedIn and things like that. But
Well, I
it's
think
interesting.
this advisor interpreted that I was saying that AI driven model portfolios were more intelligent than anything else. I that was my guess, and that's not. I was saying quite the opposite. And that you could get into indexed, and beside the
Well,
point.
I think it's a
But like you
sensitive
said, yeah,
subject a
you're
lot of
trying to dig up the
times
right thing. It's like, hey,
when
I'm trying to help you out. You know what? I'm just going to start a podcast. I'm just going to start a podcast, 0 basis points. You tune in, and you won't have to look for any links. In fact, critique this because we're going to drop this in X and LinkedIn. Like, tell
yeah.
us what you want us to talk about. Tell me where I'm wrong. Like, and that's the thing. It's like I always mess around with my wife and kids. I'm like, you guys got to mess around back to me. Like, you can scare me and hide behind the door and scare me. So, like, I would love for people to tell me I'm wrong. The way that gems are created is just like if you all just agree, like, yeah, that's right, that's the best solution. That is the number one problem. It's like, well, tell me what you think the number one problem is, and maybe we'll bring that, and just like in X, which is different, like the more likes it gets, like it just bubbles to the top of the algorithm, and it reaches the right people. Like I don't see LinkedIn behaving that way.
No, I think what's interesting too, when you speak about AI, it opens yourself up to a lot of criticism from folks who might not really understand what's going on in that space, and a lot of people are very touchy about it because there's so much misinformation around AI replacing what they do as an advisor or something like that, which is totally not true. I mean, it's almost like the robo advisory craze that we saw a couple of years back, where people just assumed because you had Betterment, Wealthfront, and some of these robo advisors out there, suddenly you didn't need an advisor, which is ridiculous now that we look back at it. But there are ways that you can leverage those robo advisors to take care of like small accounts, so you don't have to spend so much time doing that. Same thing with AI. Look, I tell everyone, and I was just in Vail talking about this with a couple of people who asked what does it look like for the next couple of years with AI. We are at the stage of artificial narrow intelligence. There is beyond that artificial general intelligence and artificial super intelligence. And when I say this, it's not linear at all, right? They're so far apart because of the level of compute, the level of um, data you need to get to that point of actual I would say training. But where we are now with the narrow intelligence, surprisingly, it's really good at taking a lot of data in, processing that data, working with that data, being able to leverage insights, analytics, monitoring. So when I talk to a lot of advisors, they're like, well, I asked something in ChatGPT one time, or my kid did, and it was wrong, so I'm not going to use AI. That's the totally wrong approach, right? I think if you are waiting for artificial general intelligence to come out, which I've heard that term used by a lot of folks, that same kind of verbatim statement, it's like Well, one, at that point, I think you're going to be way behind the ball because all these other advisors who are embracing the technology, who are early adopters of it, are going to know how to leverage it and are going to know how to run their businesses more operationally efficient and scalable ways. So that's a couple of things that I would love to talk about in zero basis points. I think it's a very transformative environment right now with the way AI has been taking shape. I think where we can kind of be a wealth of knowledge for folks is like we're at the forefront. We're developing tools in AI. Might as well talk about them and show you a little bit of it kind of in this life cycle, so you're not so fearful of it, and you come and understand to love it and embrace
Right.
it in your business.
I'm glad. While you were talking, I remembered something. So Laser App is one of the tools and companies that iPipeline acquired. Laser App has been in the industry for 20 years. It's like every SaaS provider, Laser App was your first integration partner because everybody needed to fill out forms, like, so. But the guy that started it, Ed Beggs, was an accountant. And he was just looking, OG Laser App people can tell the story better than me, obviously, but was looking for an easier way to fill out forms. And he talks about the way that accountants in the accounting industry responded when TurboTax came out. Like, oh shit, dude. This thing, you just take pictures of your tax forms, like with your phone, like, and it was like, man, this is going to wipe out the accounting space. And like, do you know any accountant like that isn't pulling their hair out like right now? Like they're pouring like a scotch like right now. It's 4:52 Eastern. Like, so,
Yeah.
well, maybe not, but maybe in 5 hours. But they're busy, and so it what that tool did is it took away a lot of the work that nobody wanted to do. It's like, first of all, these are clients that they're like DIY people anyway. Like I'm one of them. But and a lot of the stuff that you and I always talk about, it's like the way I use AI today is, and I try to tell people like you got to start just thinking about like one day you'll be living with a robot that you can talk to, and the robot will stand there and maybe it'll be wearing clothes. But it's pretty much the case today. It just looks like this. But you can be like, I've hit a block and I don't feel creative anymore. Really, George? That's interesting. What's going on? Well, yeah. And you can just start talking through anything. Or if you thought about something in the middle of the night or something that you wanted to ask AI to do for you when you were, just roaming your hallway awake for a second, it could just expedite and fill little gaps. So it's, and I'm not saying that like ARQA is a million times more powerful than that, but when we think about AI, we can just think about all the things that might have been like, oh man, I don't want to do that. It stinks to do that.
Yeah.
Like AI can do that. So it's, like, so you just have to remember to consider it and start talking to like that robot on your phone because it's just sitting there waiting for you to use it. And the more you talk to it, the more you train it. But I think that when it comes to ARCA, like the barrier will be getting the world, the industry, and I already understand it. But if I say, I can't ask ChatGPT or Grok about like my personal taxes because I've just fed my personal taxes into that. But what you're doing with ARCA, like, can you like just talk a little bit about to the advisors who are scared that like, I don't want to feed, I don't even want to tell AI that my client isn't going to be home tomorrow. I don't want to say it's going to be on vacation and while they're away, I'd like to come up with something, I don't want to, like, how do you protect that data? How does ARCA do that? Because I think that's a big one to get over early.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we've done so much diagrams around it for clients and prospects who we've been talking to because they just can't wrap their head around it since there's so much risk related to privacy and data security. But what we've done at ARCA and what really took a long time for us to build and was the back end of our tools and platform to be able to leverage any LLM that's out there. So we're LLM agnostic. We can leverage the newest technology out there, but create functions that sit on a wall between where the tenant is and where their data lives against the outside world. So any third party data sharing doesn't really go on there. So we don't send any of your data out. And how we really stumbled upon that when we first were doing a lot of the testing and building and development in the back end was we realized it would take a long time if you were to architect a solution like a wrapper of GPT to just send data out in mass and then get responses back. Especially when it comes to portfolio data where it's sitting with tax lots, every position is exponentially greater now, the data load is larger. And ChatGPT at that time too was having so much latency issues because it was new, people were in there testing out stuff, breaking it, so it would go down middle of the day. So if you were to send out a bunch of data and expect a response fairly quickly, it was not going to happen. From a data security as well as uptime, for in the SaaS space, as you know, you can't just be out middle of the day when someone's trying to run an analysis in their portfolio. So we were like, how do we actually build this thing, and how can we leverage it still without having the issue of this latency and slowness? So when we came up to this process of building these functions that kind of live against our data set, where it doesn't let any data go out to this third party, one, we solve for the quickness, becoming much speedier and scalable. But then also we realize that it's all security related too, because nothing is going outside of your environment. And as long as you're keeping that data secured, it's kind of having your own version of this LLM that's sitting on top of your data without having to let it see anything. So it's kind of like you're a prisoner. You're just opening its eyes for a real quick function, and then you're like, all right, don't look at anything again. So it becomes very interesting, and I think that model is where a lot of people are seeing, like where DeepSeek came out and they're like, hey, I could just put it on my own system and run it, etc. There's so many pipes though you still have to build, and just the indexing of that data. So it's not maybe fit for an RA to be able to just do it in-house, but we kind of created the architecture and the skeletons for anyone to just pick it up and place it, just like invent it on top of their data lake, as a micro app.
Now I remember, like when you were first talking to T3, what I was hearing is going back to what I did at Grendel, where we were, a CRM, we're aggregating data, we're archiving emails, we have documents, so we have everything. And so often it was like the advisors are like, dude, you've got it. Like your report doesn't have that. Like why? And so they were telling us we were holding the data hostage, and it was just like, I don't know why the engineers won't let this be a part of the report. I can't even remember what the problems were. But
how often, isn't it funny how often you hear someone who is outside of the space say like, why can't I just get this because I see it here? Like, why can't you just, it's so easy, just take this thing and put it here. And it's like, unfortunately, just technology's been built so differently that you can't
yeah,
do a lot of that. It's not as easy as me just dropping in something like you said, laser app, picking up the data. It should be so simple, but where you see a lot of the folks who are catering to the capital call private market where they're picking up that data off of it, it's still so reliant on machine learning and the feedback of the user to be able to choose the data and kind of do it, where you're like, hey, if I just put some AI into this, guess what? It's going to read 90% of what you need out of there, and regardless of where it's located on the page. But again, you just have to go back to building it and doing it on a platform that allows the data security and privacy, because there's so much you're uncovering there. So it's
yeah,
really
even
funny.
like our industry will be like, why can't everything just work? Damn it! Like, and then you'll talk to two firms, Salesforce, Orion, eMoney Advisor, and Fidelity and Schwab. And those are the custodians and the tools they use. And they behave like two completely different animals. So if they said we need an integrated ecosystem for that set of products, it's the exact same tool set, two different firms. And that's what makes the RIA space so dynamic. Like that's what nobody gets about it. It's like, well, I mean, it's like, I won't get into too many analogies, but firms are using the same tools, doing very different things, and that means that key performance indicators arise from a combination or different pieces of one system, but everybody's just looking to unify it. So, David Shanowski, our homeboy, man, he's like one of my favorite writers. I'll say like OG PC Mag writer now at wealthmanagement.com or Informa. But he wrote an article back in the day, man. I need to Google it. It said hug your small like SaaS vendor or like something like that, because like all of us, like we're just banging our heads like, man, are the two firms are they're both using it, and they call them households and they create their households in Salesforce, but Orion's householding and every time, but they call it this, and you're mapping across the walls of your house and whiteboards in your office, and you're doing everything you can to make it easy for an advisor to just respond to a client, a prospect that might want to join the firm, or a client who has joined the firm that wants something else, needs an account service, wants a new product, wants money moved from there to here. Um, and dude, that's another thing that we do a lot of is the money movement. And you and I have a lot of fun talking about like crypto and bloodbath in the meme space for the last month. I'm glad I was like out of it for the last. I kind of burned out like a month ago. Like, thank God.
Yeah, you
This is
let
the
me know. I
last couple of
remember.
weeks.
Yeah. Good timing. I mean,
Yeah,
coincidentally, but
it always looks like you're like, should I be a part of this or not? But like that's as gambly as I get. I don't gamble on sports, but I'd rather spend 10 or $20 on a coin and just have a little bit of fun.
hey,
Um,
I mean,
but
there's some technology behind it, at least for the ones that are not the altcoins and the meme coins, but it could be fun for sure. I mean, I
but
think the last one was
yeah, but
Sahakyan.
fun, fun. But when the craziest thing about is when a coin gets released, like when Trump released that coin. Okay, and I'm not saying I'm all for it. Well, I was totally like into it. I'll put it
Yeah,
that way. But there were so many people, and what made people in crypto like hype was all these people saying, "How do I get it?" And you're thinking like, dude, it's so easy. You just copy and paste things, and that's how you move money around in crypto. And
yeah,
then you've got BlackRock talking about tokenization. And you and I know what that means because we're messing around with phantom wallets and we're doing all these things. And that doesn't mean we're like degenerate, meme coin traders, but you've got to set up an infrastructure that allows you to move money between your bank and your crypto wallet and your Solana wallet and, ETH. So like these big institutions, BlackRock, like they get that inside and out. And there are Bonaparte. There are some accounts on Twitter. These guys, they know it. Like they know when Farcoin came out, like their clients were asking about it. You at least be able to talk about it.
yeah.
Because if you can talk about it, here's some more free basis points. Imagine if you could get the crypto audience who is massively sitting there obsessively scrolling on Twitter right now and say, look, man, if you've got 10 million bucks, let's just take 7.5 of it. And you
Be
can keep,
responsible.
yeah, and get it out of crypto. Keep the remaining 1.5, and then let's talk about greed and sanity for a week, okay? And I'll tell you the best advisors I've seen in my life. I can think of one in particular. Heard him talk to his clients a lot about greed. So and when and sometimes when you think about could AI could replace me or a robo advisor, and Michael Kitcey's big, everybody in the industry knows who he is, the Kitcey's technology map, but he'll remind you that like AI won't be like, maybe you can't retire at 60, but you can start consulting at 55. And, there's a lot of other things that you can do. And I always thought, man, like, do any advisors ever ask their clients for like a resume or like whatever, just like what, let me get familiar with your skill set because you might have some like cool opportunities that I can tie into like other clients. And so I think that we can help expose advisors to like, this crypto thing that might seem like a joke, which is like a pool of assets that's so massive, and that, if there were ever a rebellion against wealth management, man, it is crypto. Like it is self custody, it's tokenization, and advisors need to tune into that like today, and we'll talk about it like probably every podcast. But
I'm sure it'll come up for sure. And what's
right. Not every podcast, but
yeah,
so we're not going to be a crypto podcast, but I think that you've got to be able to talk about that intelligently if you want to attract new clients. Everybody's talking about organic growth, and I think that's a big leader in organic growth,
of course.
as opposed to how are firms really growing? Is it because they're buying other firms? It is because the rich clients are sending in another $10 million check. Like, what's the real deal? Like, what are the net new assets? Like, let's boil this thing down. And I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
But you were about to say though. I
was gonna say what's funny is that this was in 2017 when I just had left ARQA and was doing some of the consulting. I happened to be at a family office / ARA, and they kind of worked like an MFO. In the building, kind of helping them with their implementation of Adapar. And suddenly I get one of the people that I was working with asks me, he's like, what do you know about Bitcoin? I don't even remember what the price was. I mean, you can look it up at 2017, how much it was trading at around February or April. And he's like, "How much do you know about Bitcoin?" And I was like, "Well, I know a little. You know, what do you need?" And he's like, "Well, the patriarch of the family wants to open a Bitcoin wallet. I don't know how to do it. Can you like go upstairs and help him do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I can. I mean, happy to." And it's
Does he have
so
an
interesting.
iPhone? Yeah.
What was that?
Does he have an iPhone? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, does he have an iPhone? Does he know of, Coinbase, Kraken, whatever it was at the time? And what was funny is just so he was kind of like, it started where I walked into the office and it was like, where do I even buy it? What am I even buying? But he just wanted to play with it, and he was an older gentleman, and I kind of appreciated. I always have appreciated early adopters and some of the so tech forward advisors and family offices who I've come across in my last couple of years in working with ARQA and Blackmar. And so, he was just like, I just want to see what it's about because I'm hearing about it, I'm reading about it. I want to just be part of that ecosystem, right? And I think, like you said, that's going to be naturally the progression of a lot of the wealth management that's out there because whether they like it or not, that does become a part of this financial ecosystem. And it might be some small ledger someone has somewhere. It could be some meme coin that has turned into mainstream, and there's so much liquidity that they have that's locked up, and they don't know what to do with it. But it's funny that was the first time I'd heard of someone in kind of proper traditional wealth asking about it. And then over the next couple of years, there have been people saying like, "Can we grab wallets and bring them in for reporting and kind of to give them a better picture of their net
Right.
asset?" Like total net worth, because now they're sitting on a very large pool of it. It's almost like reporting on real estate that this guy's going to hold forever. He's just sitting in it in some ledger, and it's like, yeah, there are ways to do it, and I think that's going to be that's it's an understatement to say it'll come up on the podcast for sure because there's so much right now in regulation too that's happening with Trump in power that just has to be addressed. And like you said, you have to be intellectually at least in the know to be able to handle those questions when you come across them.
Right. And I think that it can be like if you know Tyrone Ross, have you heard of him? Like he doesn't know who I am, but he's somebody I follow and has been right, as far as kind of his predictions and where this would go. And I think that he's kind of been a trailblazer of like keeping this like front and center of the discussion at some of these conferences that this is something we need to be talking about new investors about. But at the same time, there's that whole other, there's so much wealth in crypto that I think should be converted into traditional assets to protect. And like all these young heads in crypto, like don't know that, like they just don't trust the process. So if you look at, I think it's John Bonaparte. He's on Twitter. We got to tag him or something. The guy's the man, but really has just done an incredible job of like letting people know at least like you can throw that into a dispute. You're talking about your investments with him. He'll bring that in real fast, dismiss it properly or include it properly. But I'm sure that he's got a real smooth, polished way. I can't imagine that guy's dealing with any problems growing organically. And I would hope that some of it is protecting wealth that was created in crypto and now being preserved more traditionally. Some of my crypto homies might hate me for that, but this is everything around me, all the clothes I wear, the house I live in, everything in my life, like I got because I sold some SaaS to advisors. So I respect everything about this industry. It's my pop-up was getting a book every year that told you how investments performed in the 60s. You didn't need updates by API calls every day. My dad was an advisor. My brothers are advisors. I worked in our RIA when we built Grendel. So everything that, the advisors that wake up every morning, the he's and the she's that get up and get polished, that want to keep it cool for their clients who are living in a very stressed out world. And like somehow you got them to like let you manage their money, which is like, a lot of trust and a lot of power that they entrust you with. And so I'll always give like all of my regards and gratitude to the traditional wealth management space because so far that's what's been like the best thing for the investor as far as we've seen so far.
I
I've
agree.
seen some incredible wealth generated in crypto, but the traditional seems to be is obviously the way that you mitigate risk.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Well, I think we dropped a lot of knowledge, or at least mentioned a lot of stuff that we're going to potentially talk about in the future episodes on this one, which was supposed to be more of an introductory for zero basis points to get people excited about it. But I can't wait for future episodes where we can dive a little deeper. We might do one specifically for crypto, and then obviously it'll come up thematically. But we want to handle more current event stuff as well that comes up because I think the audience would love it. So with that said, I guess we'll sign out, and you'll expect more of zero basis points episodes to come. Whether it's LinkedIn, X, we'll start kind of posting them across the board. But we're excited to take this journey with you. Excited to take this journey with you too, George. I think you have a wealth of knowledge, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, that we can kind of share with the outside world within the context versus just little snippets here and there on LinkedIn. So it could be a little bit longer format. And I can't wait. I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of fun stuff we can do here.
yeah. I think what a lot of RIAs, TAMPs, broker dealers, custodians will learn joining this is just what we want to cover is a day in the life of an advisor and what they're going through with their clients. Because that's I think what we get overlooked. We get so obsessed about the solution. It's like, okay, what about the advisor and the clients, and like, what are they really doing there? And I think we have a really good idea of that. So whether we're talking about AI or crypto or CRMs or performance, we're going to be focused on the stuff that advisors are dealing with, and what's hot, what's not, and tell us where we're wrong and what you'd love to hear, and we'll talk about it.
Would love to hear it. So yeah, with that said, I mean, I would invite the listeners to subscribe, share, and follow up with our journey for zero basis points. And we'd love to hear where we're wrong, as George said, and even have guests on here. So looking forward to taking this experience and journey with you all. Thanks so much, George, for joining me this afternoon. I can't wait for this to get published. We have a great team behind us who will get this to where we need it to go, and looking forward to more of these.
Cool. See you again soon.
All right, talk soon.